Oh, so I guess Vivek is way taller than I am. I never noticed. Bienvenue, welcome, willkommen. I am the Associate Executive of Canada FBM 2021, who curated this fantastic literary programming, and we have to agree, I think, this awesome pavilion. Now, today, we are very happy to have with us on stage Vivek Shraya with Dirk Oosthoek, and they will be with us for the next 30 minutes. And we may have in the audience in a couple of minutes our ambassador to Canada in Berlin, Monsieur Dion. I was touring the pavilion with him in a couple of seconds ago, so hopefully he can join us. But for now, s'il vous plaît, je vous demande d'accueillir Vivek Shraya sur la scène. I will ask Vivek and Dirk to join me on stage. Merci beaucoup. Bonne séance.
Thank you, Jennifer. And just a little patience before Vivek comes on stage because she's doing a performance. And I would like to do a little introduction, if you don't mind. My name is Dirk Hulstronk, and I'm a writer, I'm a poet, I'm a translator, and a cultural activist from Frankfurt. I'm extremely proud that I was asked to present performance and talks with Vivek Shraya here on stage for the guest of honor events. And I'm sure some of you have already heard or seen something of Vivek Shraya because she was having this wonderful talk on the opening night of Book Fair Frankfurt on Tuesday, and also on Wednesday in Canada night performance and talk with Vivek Shraya. Yeah, and actually I also had the honor to already have another two talks with her, one on the radio yesterday where we were talking about pop culture very much, and her new book, The Subtweet, which I would recommend that one as well. And also we talked yesterday, or we were supposed to talk about poetry, but actually we talked about other things. So now this is the poetry stage, the real poetry stage today. But for those of you who don't know Vivek Shraya, just a few words about her. Vivek is a multidisciplinary and I would say a multidimensional artist, a musician, a writer, a creative writing teacher, LGBTQ2 activist, and a lot more. In the 20 years of her career, she created an incredible body of work that includes 14 albums, 10 books in 8 different genres, 6 short films screened at festivals around the world, 4 photo projects exhibited in galleries across North America, and 1 stage play. It's really hard to list all her accomplishments because there are so many. Yesterday on this stage, I asked Vivek if there's anything she hasn't done yet. And we came up with sculpture. But let's see if this is still true next year. So Vivek Shraya is really embracing creativity in all its forms. And to me, it looks like she's the one-person embodiment of Canada's book fair motto, singular plurality. And this must be the reason why she is so busy these days to represent Canada's diversity. And I would add, Vivek would also make a great representation for next year's guest of honor, Spain, and their motto of boundless creativity. So hopefully Vivek comes back next year. Vivek really breaks down all the cliches about gender, but also about being a writer, because she really easily combines writing with music, pop culture, social media, crossing over many genres and many scenes. In all cultural and social discourses, you will hardly find another writer, or another artist actually, who is so much up to date. This also means that Vivek is able to cross over very different audiences and readers. What I find especially interesting and important is that Vivek crosses or is accessible for young people who grew up with social media, with pop culture, with patchwork families, young people who have immigrant backgrounds, racialized people, and basically all people who don't fit into any norms. So yesterday's talk was really about her diverse art, and this is about poetry, and it's not really so much a talk, it's really a performance you are going to see now. Vivek is going to do a performance of one of her poetry books. It's called Even This Page is White. And so I'm finishing off, and please welcome on stage Vivek Schreier.
I will not make this about race. 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 I will not make believe. 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 I will not bring my race to work. 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 I will not bring my race to school. 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 I will not share my race online. 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 Race is a choice, not a construct. 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 Podium mic on. Remind them, this land is not ours. Heads nod, hands clap, feet fixed. Are you even in the room? Once my mother accidentally drove near a reserve. The only time I have seen her afraid hit gas pedal. Strange to be Indian and the sound of car locks to be synonymous with Indians. Is acknowledgement enough? I acknowledge I stole this, but I'm keeping it? Social justice or social performance? What would it mean to digest you and yours and blood and land and minerals and trees and dignities and legacies to really honor? No. Show gratitude? No. Word for partaking in violence in progress? Last year, Baltimore intersection, black man approaches. Once again, finger reaches for car lock, except this time the finger is mine. Your second father when you had barely a father. My arm ever wrapped around your shoulder. Rolled macaroni burritos for your dinner. Knock-knock jokes for your laughter. But when they asked you, why are you so much darker than your brother? Called you the N-word, lingered for an answer. All I did was bask. The truth about the race card is that even before I knew what it meant, I knew not to play it. Refused to spin brown into excuse. Let it hold me back. Believed you when you said, we are the same. Blamed my parents and camouflaged to prove you right. No wonder you couldn't see me. People who said racism were whiny or lazy, and I was neither. But there is no worth for my work, no toll for my toil. When you hold the cards, keys, gavels, unraveled, brown is not a barrier, you are. And when you say, don't play the race card, you mean, don't call me white. Are you staring at me because? Are you not looking at me because? You don't like me because? You don't desire me because? You desire me only because? I don't like myself because? I wish I was like you. Am I safe here? Where are the others like me? There are no others like me. I was not considered because. I was only considered because. Why would you say that? Did you say that because? Do I respond? How do I respond in a way that you'll hear me? How do I respond without making you angry or uncomfortable? Can I be okay with not responding? Why doesn't someone else respond? I shouldn't have said anything. Are you ignoring me because I responded? There has to be another explanation. Maybe I'm making this up. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm too defensive. Maybe I am undesirable. Not everything's because. I can't assume the worst. Of course I'm safe here. Of course there are others like me here. You probably haven't seen someone like me. I just need to work harder. I just need to work harder. I just need to work harder. You don't know how to think about this. You don't mean what you said. Of course of course you care about me. Of course you'll hear me. Maybe it's good for you to be uncomfortable. Maybe I'm better off in the long run. What would I think of if I wasn't thinking about this? A dog named Lavender? A home in Idaho? A book about landscapes? What would I make if I wasn't thinking about this? Who could I be if I wasn't thinking about this? Whiteness, the meteor that fractured our planet, shattered us apart, our memories erased, brown fragments unanchored in white space. This is why every time a brown person sees another brown person, a double take. Do I know you? In my dreams, we clutch each other, praise each other, desperate to reconnect. But when I wake, I'm jealous of you, of how much white people like you. Or maybe all this time, I've been aching for you to remember me, to remember you as intimate instead of adversary. So how can I love you better? What I ask myself when I feel jealous. Won't let scarcity come between. We've already lost so much when we should be friends. You have a twin. Worst thing to tell a queen. His name is Raji. I despise him already. Who, I ask, avert my eyes. I guess he's brown and tall. No one says, and queer. No one needs to. I'm told of my twins often with a snicker, a secret joke on both of us. Hope we never meet. I recognize my twin across the Central Academic Building hallway, so gangly, his wrists scrape the floor, giraffe neck, rusty streaks in his mushroom haircut. We pretend not to notice each other, betrayed by the presence of the other. He knows the precise strain and witchery to refashion deviance, flamboyancy as extraordinary. Why would he take this away from me? So accustomed to being token, his arrival obsoleted me. So accustomed to being token, his arrival obsoleted me. 2 weeks later, I'm told, by the way, Raji can't stand you. Two brown faggots distantly loathing each other because how else can we liberate the hurt from being brown and queer in a dirt city that hates us so hard that even one word, twin, tells us there isn't enough space for both. Dear Raji, sorry for not recognizing you as my brother, admiring you as my sister. Pledged my flesh to iron when soft wasn't safe. Muscle to make mask, mask to make muscle, muscle to mask muffle, firm instead of supple, stubble instead of smooth. In rubble, my woman refused to buckle, rumbled, stayed subtle, chewed out leather muzzle. I would rather struggle, trouble, rather a fist, 10 knuckles, than cede one more vessel to men. Sometimes the inconceivable, I am tender, tensionless in my body, my gender. Photographs don't make me shrink, feel stranger, wish to be a stranger. Failure, the word forgotten. Cower, the action, now a strut. Sway, saunter. Is this just because in my bed there is a white man? The first time we kissed, my nose bled, and the second. How often must you prove your pigment when your entire body is painted bronze? Have you ever heard white question its color? Snow, moon, salt, milk, tooth, chalk. What if there's no right way to be brown besides the brown you are? Soil, nut, clove, wheat, bark, Pluto. Hi, everyone. My name is Vivek Shrey. This? Oh, hi, I'm still here. Hi. How's it going? First of all, I want to thank you so much for being here. I've said this a couple times, but this is like my first performance. These are some of my first performances since March 1st, 2020. And I just know how much work is involved for each one of you to be here, how much you're sacrificing, how much effort it is. And I just want to, on behalf of all artists on the planet, just want to say thank you so much for coming back into rooms, coming back into spaces. Again? Okay. I know some people really like the Zoom thing. That's not my jam. So many of artists just really appreciate you being here. So thank you. Today, oh yeah, sure. Let's clap for everyone. Let's clap for you, please. Should I swap this before is that a good idea? Can we try this? Is that okay? Great. So I was just reading or performing from my book of poetry called Even This Page is White. And one of the challenging things about writing that book, aside from racism, was thinking about my place in Canada as a person of color, but who's also a settler on stolen land. What does it mean for me to be writing a book about racism when essentially I'm on someone else's land? Also, what does it mean to be writing a book of poetry when in my culture, South Asian culture, Indian culture, there's a long history of anti-Black racism. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this word shadism. Maybe around hands in the air. Anyone familiar with the word shadism? Yeah. So shadism is this idea that the lighter you are, the more beautiful you are, and the darker you are, the worse you're treated in your community. And that's definitely that's very prevalent in India and certainly in the communities I grew up in. And it's very much about anti-Black racism. So I felt like if I was going to write a book about racism, I didn't want to just talk about, my experience with white people. I wanted to talk about, well, this is your last performance. Enjoy it. You thought it was just the pandemic. No, it's applause, yes. But anyways, Nicki Minaj, any Nicki Minaj fans? I don't know how much pop culture from the North America translates out here, but I'm just curious. Nicki Minaj, yes, anyone? Well, Nicki Minaj said this wonderful quote. I'm sort of standing in front of it. It says, Black women influence pop culture so much, but are rarely rewarded for it. And this quote really, really haunted me because it made me think about growing up in Edmonton, that's where I'm from, and how much it was the music made by Black women, actually. So Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, TLC, that it was these artists that really opened the world of pop music to me. Before, I was only listening to my parents' Bollywood, which is great, but when I heard I Will Always Love You, I mean, how do you turn that song down? I mean, maybe you want to, but for me, it really brought me into pop music. And so what I did when I heard this quote is I went through my iTunes and I selected one lyric from every Black female musician, producer, artist, band, and I compiled it together into a poem piece, which I would love to perform for you to close my set, which again I wrote as my way of showing gratitude to Black female artists. My love has come along, my lonely days are over. I never knew there was a love like this before. This is no ordinary love, birds flying high, You know how I feel. When the sun shines, we shine together. Brown skin, you know I love your brown skin. I love your smile. Oh, when you walk by every night, talking sweet and looking fine. There's a boy I know, he's the one I dream of. I keep on falling like a moth to a flame burned by the fire. I've got this burning, burning, yearning feeling inside me. It's this one thing that's got me tripping. Dust yourself off and try again. I've been doing my own thing. Love has always had a way of having bad timing. You gotta be bad, you gotta be bold, you gotta be wiser. Did you say I've got a lot to learn? Free your mind and the rest will follow. Don't need no hateration, holleration. Perfection is a disease of a nation. Some of y'all ain't writing well, too concerned with fashion. Living my life like it's golden. Well, it's a groove thing, it's got a funky swing. Seems I have the strangest dream. If it's murder, you know she wrote it. Okay, first things first, I'll eat your brains. I bust the windows out your car. Can you pay my telephone bills? We think you're a joke, shove your hope where it don't shine. I know what you're doing, yeah, you need to give it up. Had about enough. Girls, you know you better watch out. My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard. You can catch me at the hot spot. I bet you want the goodies. My sex is like, whoa. I put my thing down, flip it, and reverse it. If that's your boyfriend, he wasn't last night. He's got me open like 7-Eleven. Sock it to me, sock it to me, sock it to me, sock it to me. I guess that cunt get an E-N. Drop it low, girl. You can bring it back up and make it the fella say, damn, bag lady, you gon' hurt your back. I get so weak in the knees, I can hardly speak. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you used to. Don't walk away, boy. My love won't hurt you. Boys and boys should be together. I try to say goodbye and I choke. Can't you see that I'm lonely? Rescue me. Tell me the truth, boy. Am I losing you for good? What I need from you is understanding. Thank you so much. I think we're going to have a little conversation now, me and Dirk. Everyone, please welcome Dirk back to the stage as well. Yay. Hi.
Hey. Well, that was pretty impressive, and I think one could see, how many ideas you brought into this, well, actually quite short show. It wasn't really long, but there were so many different ideas about these really difficult topics, and it's really not easy to talk about these topics, about racism, and it's also not easy to talk about these topics as a white person, as I am, of course. Maybe to make it a little easier for me, why don't we start with the title?
Okay.
So what was the
Even this page is white?
Even this page is white. How did you come up with this title?
I mean, to be honest, it's a really great question. Part of it was actually just witnessing racism in the literary industry and just being frustrated with like who was getting invited to do things over and over again, who's getting nominated for big prizes, that sort of thing. And I remember just texting a friend being like, I'm going to write a book of poetry called Even This Page is White. And I kind of thought it was funny, like it was meant to be kind of a joke. But then I was like, maybe that's a good idea. So then I kind of went with it. So that's where it started. But I just want to go back to something you said. You're just like, as a white person, it's difficult to talk about racism. But I just want to say, like, to be honest, I think that your voice is really important, actually, because sometimes as a brown person, it's like it's kind of tiring to be the person talking
Yeah.
about racism. So we actually want white people to like talk about racism. So please feel free. I'm happy to pass on.
Yeah.
Mic.
No, actually, I have my own mic, luckily here. Yeah, it's a bit tricky anyway. But you already said something is about what inspired you to do this piece. It's of course some kind of a frustration. I hear maybe some kind of anger also,
Sadness.
sadness. But what was there really a point when you said, "Well, now I have to write about it"? And why was that? What was that time about?
Yeah,
why
so
that time?
I
You know,
love
why
that.
didn't you start it like 10 years ago, or why at that time?
I love that question. So, I mean, I think for me, what's complicated as someone who has multiple identities, as a queer person, as a brown person, when I experience discrimination, I don't always know what it is that's making someone uncomfortable. Is it my skin color? Is it my gender? Is it my makeup? And I think for the longest time, race was kind of the last frontier for me, like especially growing up in Canada, which is very diverse and multicultural. I think it took me a very, very long time. And part of it's my light skin privilege where I really didn't really look at it. And I think to me, what really started making me change how I looked at the world was actually when the Black Lives Matter movement started in 2016. It was around that time I'd already started thinking about my own race in a very different way, which sounds silly, right? Because you're like, well, you're brown. Obviously, you've thought about being brown. But again, growing up in Canada, because of my experience, like it wasn't, and because I had so many problems with other things, it wasn't something that I really focused on. But I would say it was something around that time of 2016 and the conversations that were happening in the U.S. Around Black Lives Matter that like really cemented the importance of you're either quiet or you speak up. And I think for me, I felt a responsibility to speak up and not just speak up about my own experiences, but like I said, how do I act as an ally to Black people, right? As someone who does have a microphone and who isn't Black. And so I think those were the things that felt really important.
Okay, and that leads me to the next question then. Why poetry? You could have chosen, you're so multi-talented, you have so many different genres at hand. So why did you choose to express yourself in poetry?
Yeah, I mean, my friends hate me for it because one of my friends is like, now I actually have to read poetry. No offense, no offense to any poets in the room, but like the running joke, I teach poetry, and one of the jokes I always make is I feel like poetry is the country music of literature, because you know how you ask people what kind of music, and they're like, I like everything but country, and so it's like poetry is kind of the same thing, and so my friends are like, oh damn, you wrote a book of poetry, I actually have to open one, but to be honest, like there's such an interesting connection between songwriting and poetry, right? So as someone who comes from a songwriting background, I think poetry felt like I don't like the word natural, but like it felt like a seamless entry. Also, my novel that I wrote before that, She of the Mountains, I was told it had a very poetic quality. And one of my dear friends, who's also an author, Canadian author that you should all check out, her name's Amber Dawn, she said to me, you should explore poetry more because you seem to get it. And so that was sort of how I ended up, those are some of the reasons why I ended up exploring poetry.
And do you think poetry as a genre might have special powers to express things that cannot be expressed other ways?
You're doing a better job of answering these questions than me. But yes, that's exactly it. The thing about poetry that I really love is that you can say hard things and the reader has to sort of just engage with it. And I don't, like with a novel, it's like it's my job to provide a clear beginning, middle, and end, right? That's my job for you. But with poetry, I can just say, is this just because there's a white man in my bed? I can just say that, and all of you, when you engage with that or you read it, you're like, you have to kind of sit with that, as opposed to me answering the question. You can ask hard questions. You can say complicated things. Even that question I say in the poem Indian, is acknowledgement enough, right? I acknowledge I stole this, but I'm keeping it. Those are kinds of things that I feel like you can say in poetry that you can't really in literary fiction, for example.
And also not in essays or any other
Well,
kind of thing.
you can say it in an essay, but it doesn't have the same punch, right? Like poetry, because it's all about being concise, it really forces you to be particular about your words. And, that's something I really care about is like, how do you choose the right word?
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good explanation. And also maybe it's about being a little ambiguous also.
I mean, some poets really like ambiguity. I remember thinking my my poetry sucked because people could actually understand it. It seemed like what people really like is when you don't understand the poetry. But yeah, I mean, again, I think it's up to the poet. For me,
Yeah.
like the poets that I really admire, that I was really getting into when I was working on Even This Page is White, was like Audre Lorde, like Black Unicorn, like works by people of color who are a lot more direct with their words. Like that's the kind of stuff that I really resonate with.
Yeah.
So ambiguity, not so much. But I mean, there's always room for ambiguity in writing, right? So
I think there is when reading this kind of poetry. There is, and even in the performance, I think one could see it that it's not. Well, at least things are not easy. It's
no,
not.
that's exactly it. Things don't have to be easy.
Yeah,
Yes.
they are really complicated. There are several layers in these kind of things, and even your position is well, it's changing sometimes, I guess. And like in the introduction speech on Tuesday, you talked about these multiple identities. I found this really interesting because you could see that your identities, first it's not stable, but it's changing, it's developing all the time. It's like every day developing, and you just said like the race topic wasn't so much on the front for a long time for you. Now it is. So I wonder how it's developing in the next next couple of years. But just you just started this performance, this particular performance, with a word which is really hard to spell out in Germany. The word race, I would say, but you did. It's a kind of a provocation. It's a calculated provocation, I guess. So what does the word race mean to you?
To me specifically, I mean, when
Yeah.
I think about like, I mean, the opening poem was like, I will not make this about race.
Yeah.
You know, I'm talking about skin color for me. That's how I'm using that word. And again, part of it is like a bit satire because I think brown people are always, or people of color are always accused about making this about race. Like, don't make this a race thing. Don't make this a racism thing. And so I think so many of us actually learn not to make it about race. I don't think people understand how much work we do all the time to not make it about race. And that's why the poem is like a play on words because it's called Eraser. So it's like I'm essentially, maybe it's too literal. I don't know. I think I'm clever sometimes, but maybe it's too on the nose. But I'm literally erasing myself. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, the interesting thing is you wrote a poem about these topics, and so a poem is of course about a form. It's a form of words you have. But discussing this, it's really much about the ideas that are behind the words also. So, what was your idea about this book, as apart from talking about racism, about the construction of the book and the construction of the pieces?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think a lot about title because a title, when it's said over and over again, it kind of becomes a form of art in and of itself. Like, every time I say, even this page is white, I mean, there's often a reaction. There's a sort of discomfort. It's not a comfortable title. Or like one of my other books is called I'm Afraid of Men, and just by saying the title, it has a it's a provocation, right? And
Yeah.
so when I think about a book, I'm never thinking about it just as an object that you read, but I'm often thinking about it as like a physical art object that is like moving in the world. Also, like the book cover, right? Like when you're holding that in public somewhere, it's also doing some work. In terms of the construction of the book, I think one of the things I really struggled with was, who is this book for? And this is a question, I don't know how many of you are writers, but I'm often struggling with like, who's the audience, who's reading this? In Canada, the reality is the majority of the book buying public is going to be white. And so I'm like, am I writing a book of poetry on racism for white people? Is that what I'm doing? Or is this for brown people? Do brown people even want a book about racism because we live it? So I think that was one of the difficult tensions of this book, is who am I writing for? And so one of the ways that I navigated that tension is that the first chapter is called White Dreams. And there's another chapter that's called How to Speak to White People. And then the last chapter is called Brown Dreams. And so basically the gaze of the book changes, or who I'm addressing in the book changes. So sometimes I'm talking directly to white people, and sometimes I'm talking to my own people. And so it feels really important to find that balance. So, but thanks for that question.
Yeah, actually, that's also a very interesting part of this book, and you tend to make up books in a very unusual way. Like you have
Thank you.
books with a soundtrack that go with a soundtrack, and this book is not just a poetry book, but in the middle, it's kind of a interview,
conversation,
or a
yeah.
conversation about how to talk to white people, and it's a conversation, I guess.
We're
with
doing
some,
okay so far, right?
Yeah, with some, I guess, some white friends of yours. Is
Yes,
that right? Yeah.
yes.
So that's quite an unusual thing to bring it in the middle of a poetry book, you know.
Why not? I mean, for me, one of the things I thought about with that, so in the middle of Even This Page is White, there is like 4 pages that's essentially a conversation that I have with white people about racism, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. And part of why I did that, in brackets, it says something like, because I don't believe that a white reader is going to engage in this unless a white person's talking about it. And again, this is what was so interesting about, like, you know, what we saw with Black Lives Matter, but even like with any kind of social activism, it's often when the dominant person or the people in power are talking about the issue that other people pay attention. So if you came on the stage and you talked about racism, you could do a worse performance than me, but people would take you seriously, versus me coming up here doing my thing because people are like, oh, but you're a white person, you're talking about racism, so I'm going to listen to you. And so for me, that including that conversation with white people was like kind of about putting white people in the hot seat, but also trying to understand the reader. I'm always trying to think about how to reach the reader. And if it means having a white person talk in the context of the book, then maybe that's what the book needs to do. So it's also a very cynical outlook, but one based in experience.
Yeah. So what is your experience with the book and the poems and the reception of this book? And
yeah, I mean,
experience?
it's so interesting. I saw a resurgence of the book last year because of all the conversations about racism that were happening in the world. The book was also selected for, in Canada, we have like a national book contest called Canada Reads, where, you know, a book is chosen. My book was not chosen, but it was longlisted, so people were interested, which, I mean, is unusual. Poetry is not a really popular contender for Canada Reads, so that was pretty awesome. So, I mean, and people, you know, for me, the biggest thing that's really exciting about my work is when it gets picked up in schools. So I've had multiple university teachers teach that book in their class, which to me is like the hugest honor because, you know, I was saying this, I think, to you, I can't remember, but like I feel like for me, most of my education, I never read a person of color. I was never assigned a person of color. So now to go into a university and have them learn this, to me, just feels like incredible. It's also the kind of thing you can tell your parents, because I feel like I tell my parents what I do, but they don't really get it. But if I'm like, my book is in a school, they're like, oh, that sounds impressive. So
then you made it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. Yeah. So I know that you're really quick to jump from one genre to the next genre, and but do you think you'll pick up poetry, or will you continue with poetry?
We just got the time signal, so I'm going to be really fast. Will I continue with poetry? You know, relearning these poems for you to perform. I actually haven't performed these poems from Even This Page is White in a few years, but doing it again, I was like, I'm really into poetry. There's so much you can cover in such a small piece of territory, and so I'm very excited about it. So this is an exclusive for you in Frankfurt. Look for a next poetry book. Thank you so much, everyone. This is so nice. Thank you so much, sir.
I really hope for more poetry
Thank
from
you.
Vivek Shraya. Thank you so much for being
thank
here.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to do a special last thank you to Vivek. I think we can all agree she brought some glamour to the Frankfurt Book Fair this week. And we all hope that this is a call to German publishers in the room, that her books get translated in German. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure. Dirk, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and thank you for coming today. We're very happy to be able to, as Vivek said, engage this week on this stage with you. So please come back. We have programming every day. Have a nice evening. On dit en français, bonne soirée et merci beaucoup.